Jos Verstappen said it clearly. Norris focused only on Max at the start and didn't think about braking. These are the statements from Verstappen's father. And in today's video, we will look at what McLaren did wrong with the setup of Norris and Piastri's cars and why they were later disqualified due to the excessively worn plank. Let's take a look at a very interesting article about it. We obviously also need to talk about Lewis Hamilton because he made some specific statements. First, please subscribe and activate notifications so you don't miss any videos on the channel. Let's cover each topic in detail and delve into it. That said, let's start right away with these statements from Jos Verstappen, because he did say that Norris focused only on Max at the start, but he also added that Max Verstappen already knew before leaving by plane, before leaving Las Vegas, that the two McLarens would be disqualified due to the excessively worn plank. And on this, I agree with Jos Verstappen in the sense that Lando Norris did well to block Max at the start, but he blocked too much and the trajectory was wrong for approaching the turn. And you can see it clearly from the telemetry, which we will look at together, because it shows exactly that Max was much smarter than Norris at that point, and it's a point where Norris has often struggled. Let's look at the data here. Here we see the start, the reaction of the drivers at the start. We see that Max had a very short reaction time of 3.07 seconds, while Norris had 3.21, so there is already a difference of 14 milliseconds, but, well, it's not much. But still, there is already this time difference between the two drivers. Additionally, approaching the braking of turn 1, we see that Norris brakes harder. In this case, you see this section here. 100 indicates acceleration. 0 is when you start braking. You see that Norris brakes later than Verstappen, but the trajectory is much less optimal. Norris almost forgets to brake, in my opinion, at that point, allowing Verstappen to pass. Here it is, this is the line from the telemetry that shows that Norris brakes much later than Verstappen. And that's where he makes a braking error and Verstappen takes advantage to pass. It's a naive mistake in my opinion, guys. This is not the first time Norris has messed up the start, and it's not the first time Verstappen has taken advantage. In my opinion, these are small mistakes that can also impact the championship. Of course, that's not what caused most of his problems, as he was disqualified, and it's the disqualification that weighed most on Norris and also on Piastri. Look here, Norris only thinks about shutting the door on Max, which on paper is also a good idea, but you can't do it so much considering that after the turn you have a very wide trajectory. You can't take this trajectory while braking, because obviously you'll go wide afterward. And I want to show you here. You see that Max can't pass. He immediately moves to the outside. Max is smart because he realizes he can't pass there, so he immediately takes the right trajectory, the best one for the corner. Instead, Norris stays there and he even made this minor lockup. I'm not sure if you can see it. You see that he locks up because he arrived too late while braking, too much on the inside. And in this case, you see that Max is able to take advantage and pass comfortably while Norris goes wide. And not only that, he is also overtaken by George Russell, indicating that Norris really struggles with starts and suffers from it a lot. Let's move on. You see here that then there's Russell on the outside who will manage to pass. And regarding this, we also need to talk about the plank issue because there have been many theories circulating online. And I want to show you some interesting articles while others need to be debunked. Let's start with the most interesting theory I'm presenting. This article where it describes exactly how McLaren experienced the situation of plank wear. Sorry, the second practice session was interrupted by red flags, and then on Friday in Las Vegas it rained. So I didn't have the opportunity to test the setup or adjust the ride height, due to the practice sessions being almost useless for testing these setup changes. So this is McLaren's justification. Obviously, it doesn't make sense because all the other drivers were able to adjust their cars correctly for the race. And so McLaren said, "We discovered the problem during the race when we saw the indication in the pre-race during the reconnaissance laps before the race when you position yourself on the grid." And so they realized they had this problem with the cars, with their McLarens. Let's move on And here we see the difference in race pace, the difference between Lando Norris, Verstappen and Russell, and we clearly see how Norris's race pace increases significantly towards the end because they specifically say to slow down to avoid consuming the plank too much. You have the difference, for example, with Russell, whose race pace is very consistent and increases due to tire wear, but not so much because of the plank. The blue line, on the other hand, is Verstappen's, which is taken as a reference. And we see that during the race, Norris experienced at a certain point unexpectedly a drop in race pace, but it wasn't due to tire degradation. Rather, it was because McLaren told him to slow down due to the plank. So indeed, his pace dropped because the team told him to do whatever we can to try to avoid having this problem with the plank. We then saw that when Norris changed tires, he gained on Russell, reached the DRS zone and passed Russell. And there too, the instructions were a bit unclear because McLaren told him to go after Verstappen, but then told him to slow down after passing Russell. And at a certain point, they told him to slow down because of they called it a fuel problem, meaning they couldn't finish the race because they were low on fuel. But of course, that wasn't the real problem. The real issue was the plank. In short, McLaren didn't handle this situation very well. Also because Norris was aware of the plank issue and was experiencing a lot of porpoising.
Bit of porpoising still, so it was very difficult to just get that confidence at all to go flat. And for the most of qualifying, my biggest loss was just the last kink.
This is after the qualifiers. I want to point that out. Here they show an image as well. I'll show you quickly of Norris during free practice 1 and 2, where there's a lot of porpoising. You can clearly see he has a lot of porpoising. How many sparks are there that reach the ground? Here we are in free practice 2, and you can see Norris has a lot of sparks underneath, with the bottom hitting the asphalt a lot. Here McLaren could already understand that there was a problem with the plank that could wear out too much. He made a lot of sparks here, and in the reconnaissance lap, the pre-race lap, and it was already visible that the car setup was the same as in free practice 2. So there was a lot of porpoising, and Norris complained about it after qualifying. They had this problem throughout the weekend and never modified the setup. So this is a serious problem because we then saw that in Brazil, they removed any system that would increase heat in the plank area, where plank wear is measured, where there are titanium plates for measurements, meaning McLaren unexpectedly found themselves wearing out the plank too much because they couldn't use those devices to heat the titanium plates, which were banned in Brazil. This is a theory that emerged. I'll report it to you after analyzing the bottom Norris plank multiple times, and they had conflicting results, and this person complains saying, if there were conflicting results between measurements, it means it wasn't accurate. The device gave different results, and there's manipulation because the correct result should be considered. Now, this theory is completely wrong. I want to point that out, but it was circulating a bit online in the sense that different measurements are taken for various reasons, and then an average of the measurements is made, which is the actual value considered. Another thing is that obviously, there's also a change in terms of heat in the bottom area and the plank area. So measurements are taken multiple times, also because environmental conditions change. Thus, the wear thickness of the plank changes as well, because it expands with heat and contracts with cooler temperatures. In short, there are various variables to consider when making these measurements, which the Federation's delegated technicians have obviously taken into account along with McLaren's technicians. So there's no conspiracy theory. The measurements are taken after each race, and these aspects are always considered. There's also talk of Bahrain, where someone said, then all the sparks seen from the bottom of the McLaren in Bahrain makes sense. Maybe I'll show you this very interesting image here, though. This is a theory in the sense that look at how many sparks were coming from the bottom. And you can also see this porpoising effect, this heavy bottoming on the rear part of the McLaren. Now, other teams have less bottoming compared to McLaren, less porpoising, partly due to the chassis structure they have and the kinematic absorption of the suspensions with this aerodynamic phenomenon. But it's also worth mentioning that we can't attribute these sparks only to the fact that they used these wider titanium blocks because they were heated. It's a theory, it's conceivable, it's not necessarily true. I mean, we don't have definite proof of this. Surely, we have seen several teams this year, McLaren and Mercedes in particular, having more bottoming and porpoising compared to other teams, especially in corners, in fast corners, which means they touch the ground a lot there. When you need a lot of dynamic load, so you need a lower car in those instances. And it was strange. One would wonder, wow, they have so much bottoming, they're gonna wear out the plank more. But no, so it's definitely an aspect to keep in mind. But I repeat, it could also be a different chassis structure or a different kinematic response of the suspension. Let's see the difference. These are the points on the left. The current points, 366 for Verstappen, 390 for Norris, 366 for Piastri. And these are the possible outcomes for Max Verstappen to become world champion. And we see that we still have a sprint race in Qatar, a regular race in Qatar, and a race in Abu Dhabi. If Verstappen were to win the sprint race, win the race in Qatar, and win the race in Abu Dhabi, for Norris to not be champion, Norris must finish second in the sprint race in Qatar, sixth in the race in Qatar, and second in the race in Abu Dhabi. So if they finish first, second, and third in the sprint race in Qatar, Norris would have to finish sixth in one race and second in another for Verstappen to become champion. I hope I made myself clear. Otherwise, I'll show another interesting graphic that illustrates another scenario. These are the current points, always on the left, and these are the various possibilities. Verstappen wins the sprint race in Qatar, Norris is second, Piastri third, and then we see that, if I'm not mistaken, Norris finishes fourth. Sorry, third in one race and fourth in another. Yes, third in one race. If he finishes third in one race and fourth in another, they end up tied in points. But by having more Max would still be the world champion. So if Max wins everything and Norris finishes third and fourth in a race and second in the sprint race, even if they tie in points, Verstappen is the world champion because he has won more races in the season. Having said that, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton, because before the race, Lewis Hamilton made a very interesting team radio. Let's listen to it together. A motivational team radio.
With every challenge, there's an opportunity, lads. So when you're looking all the way up there, just see it as a challenge. I'll do my best to come through, make up for it. So always understanding and please to support him.
Yeah, understood.
Anyway, Lewis Hamilton says, with all challenges, there's always an opportunity. When we look up there, we only see challenges, but in the end, I will do my best to try to face these challenges and overcome them. Thank you for all the understanding. Thank you for the support you give me. In short, it's a message to say we are facing many challenges. We are going through a dark period of crisis. Despite this, I will give my all to try to overcome these challenges and move forward and try to be victorious with you as well. This is a bit of the message from Hamilton to the team. And I think he expected a bit more support from the team, an emotional response as well. We remember how at Mercedes, Toto Wolff used to support Hamilton, reassure him before the race, after the race. It wasn't just Bono who spoke to him, who, by the way, was very supportive of Hamilton, helping him emotionally, almost acting as a psychologist, we could say, and also helped him with technical details, corrections on track in terms of driving style. In short, it was training that Hamilton constantly received, despite already being a world champion. I mean, despite being a world champion, Hamilton is a very humble person even in his approach on track. And in my opinion, this transparency, this communication is missing at Ferrari. I mean, the aspect of being fully understood on a human level and also in terms of driving is missing. And internal team guidance is lacking. It seems that at this moment, Hamilton himself is the guidance for Ferrari. But at Mercedes, he had mentors like Toto Wolff and Bono who helped him stay at Mercedes and face all the challenges and difficult moments. And this internal guidance at Ferrari is missing, in my opinion. That's why I see Hamilton struggling a bit at the moment. Apart from the fact that he's having trouble driving the car from a technical point of view, but also on a human level, Hamilton a bit unsettled, confused, if you will. It's a terrible result. Speaking of yesterday's race, there's nothing positive we can take from today. At least we're close to the end. I'm looking towards the end of the season, but I'm not looking forward to the next one. I'm not looking forward to 2026. Pay attention to this point because it's crucial. That is, Hamilton doesn't want to see how it will go in 2026. In my opinion, this is a bit of a gut reaction. We've seen Hamilton say many times this year, I'm not up to Ferrari's level. Well, no, Ferrari, if we look at Leclerc, the car is good in some conditions. I can't make the most of it. Very often, he has these gut reactions, belittling himself and giving more credit to the team, the car, or others who manage to do better than him. A bit discouraged, there you go. In this case here too, this statement, we shouldn't take it literally. He always does this, starts with a goal, like at the start of a race, facing all challenges, overcoming them. Thank you for understanding. Come on, we'll make it very motivational. And then at the end of the race, maybe with a not too positive result, he tends to complain more and thus becomes a bit more discouraged about the coming years. He's the team's reference only in terms of number statistics. He's a 7-time world champion for this reason. But in terms of on-track results, Leclerc is objectively outperforming him. So this is a difficult situation to manage. When Hamilton has a moment of discouragement, it can happen. But when there are many situations, many moments where you see a driver getting so discouraged at the end of the race, well, after a while, he might lose patience, lose the desire to try, and might even decide to end his career. So be aware of this as well. I don't want to see this happen, but how long can he withstand this roller coaster of emotions, if you will, where he always says, I won't give up, I'll do everything to be myself again, be the strong driver, champion, and then later says, everything's getting worse. In short, we see this alternation of emotions that is not good for Lewis and not good for the team either, because it's always a balance of emotional highs and lows, which is not good for a driver. A driver needs to be consistent, must always have a champion's mindset, like Verstappen has. Verstappen, in this regard, is, in my opinion, even stronger than Lewis in some situations and manages to bring the team with him. Lewis, on the other hand, needs a team that supports him more in growth, while Verstappen is the team man. He is the one who drags everyone along. In fact, if you put someone in charge over him like Christian Horner, he almost clashes with Horner. He can't handle having someone over him. In fact, we've seen the clashes between Verstappen, Jos Verstappen, and even Christian Horner himself, which eventually led to Horner's departure from the team. Horner, who has been a key reference figure at Red Bull for many years. So this is also a situation to consider. Having said that, I actually want to talk about Christian Horner to tell you something. One last very important thing. He could replace Andy Cowell, who is currently the team principal at Aston Martin. So watch out, because he could take on this role. We know that in July, he left Red Bull and could take on this role at Aston Martin after completing his gardening leave. And furthermore, he might also have some shares, some equity stakes in the Aston Martin team. Because Christian Horner has always said this. When I return to Formula 1, I want to come back as the head of a team, much like Adrian Newey has done, who took some shares of Aston Martin itself. So he also wants to do the same thing, to have shares of the team because he wants to feel it's his, just like Toto Wolff has done. So this is a bit of a decision by Horner, and we'll see if he goes to Aston Martin, and will obviously be joined by Alonso. Leclerc could come in the future in case he gets tired of racing with Ferrari and wants to try to achieve different results. And pay attention to this, because Alonso, in my opinion, could work well with Horner, because Alonso is still a different kind of driver compared to Verstappen. He's a driver who needs guidance. He reminds me of the Briatore times. He needs a partner, a key figure within the team whom he respects, and who guides him to win the title. So this is it. And Alonso is somewhat in between Hamilton and Verstappen from my point of view. And speaking of Alonso, it made me laugh a lot. This is a bit of a closing I want to make, that we've heard statements from Alonso that after the race in Las Vegas, they told him this thing here. Afterwards, we recommend it.
Takes from you, I've written down some of them because you gave us something great to watch. Did you enjoy it out there at least?
Really?
Yeah, you did some nice overtakes today.
I think I did one only, so
Well, I've got an S on the end of overtakes. Lovely
fantastic.
overtakes tonight.
I hope you enjoyed it because I
And
did
I've got
one.
unlucky with the VSC as
And
well.
apparently it was on TV, so yeah, lucky for me.
In short, Alonso says, they tell him, you made some nice overtakes today in the race. And he said, really? I only made one, I think. Ah, yes, but it was a nice overtake, the interviewer tells him. And he says, oh, great. I'm glad you liked it. By the way, I know it was also seen on television, so it was very lucky. This just shows how natural and spontaneous Alonso is, which is somewhat at odds with today's Formula 1, where they often try to create dramatic moments like telling him, wow, you made so many overtakes. A bit of a compliment, if we will, to Alonso. Instead, Alonso is very direct, and I like this because he remains a bastion, Alonso of the past Formula 1, the slightly more genuine one. Let me use this term, and also more traditional. And so I like it when Alonso behaves this way because it reminds me a bit of Kimi Raikkonen of the past, a bit more direct, truthful, who tells things as they are, and so I wanted to share these statements from Alonso with you. Having said this, tell me your opinion in the comments about the championship, about McLaren, who didn't know about the plan's consumption, the whole setup issue we talked about, and the clash with Verstappen, the braking at turn 1, etc. Also tell me your thoughts on Lewis Hamilton's situation, both emotionally and for the future. The statements about 2026, Christian Horner, who will replace Andy Cowell at Aston Martin, so also the Aston Martin situation. I am curious to read and respond to all your comments. As always, if you enjoy the videos, leave a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you always stay up to date on all the latest news about Formula 1 and Ferrari. That's all from Rasta here. See you in the next video.